Hello and welcome to ADHD KC Conversations. I'm your host, Kristen Stuppy, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. If you're a parent, caregiver, or a adolescent or young adult trying to learn more about navigating life with ADHD, neurodivergent, then you're in the right place. Today, I am so thrilled to have a very special guest joining us, Dr. Benjamin Lyons from Purple Wellness. Dr. Lyons is a licensed clinical professional counselor, a psychometry specialist, and a certified ADHD and autism specialist. He's an advocate for neurodivergent and LGBTQ communities, bringing a wealth of experience and compassion to his work. Benjamin's going to be presenting at the ADHD KC Parent Group February event on February 11th, 6:30 Central Time. It will be online, so you can join us from anywhere. His talk is titled Neurodivergent Adulting, Preparing for Life After High School, and it's going to explore how parents can support their teens as they transition to adulthood, and he'll maybe give us a few more tidbits and insights about what he'll talk about. And you can register for his event on adhdkc.org. Hit the events tab to find all our events, and don't miss it. Today, we're going to dive in deeper to Benjamin's story, kind of his transition and journey to becoming a therapist, his passion for helping neurodivergent individuals thrive. And Benjamin, of course, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you, Kristen. I'm so pleased to join you today. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's start with your journey. You've worn so many hats. You've been an academic advisor, a career coach, a college educator, and now a mental health counselor. The many hats thing is actually becoming a theme with my guests. It probably serves the ADHD community to talk about all these different hats too. But what inspired you to focus on mental health, particularly in areas like ADHD, autism, and trauma?
Sure. So, some of the many hats, I'm an ADHDer myself. And so some of that reflects kind of that shifting interest in having lots of things. Kind of a through line, though, of a lot of my work has been centered around trying to demystify things that can be hidden behind like complicated processes, complicated professional language. Almost every field has its terms and things that can kind of obscure to the layperson. Okay, what am I looking at and what's going on? And so that's part of how I got into higher ed, and realizing that I myself, when I went back to school, didn't really know how transfer worked, didn't understand how financial aid worked. And my process would have been much easier if I had known and someone could have helped me understand. And so that's kind of been the underlying goal of particularly my education career and now into mental health, has been, how can I try to be a translator and try to bring to the surface a lot of the things that are often hidden, sometimes unintentionally, because for professionals, it's the thing we do every day, but for the people we serve, it's often exceptional, right? Mm-hmm. And so trying to approach work from that lens, both as an educator and then going into mental health, I went into that too because I saw unmet need. I, as a queer person, struggled to find care with folks that I felt like were competent and could understand my experience. And so my husband and I both actually went back to school together after a career in education. He was a classroom teacher in Olathe while I worked in higher ed, and we went back to school together, and now we're both therapists. And I got into this work in particular because I saw myself in my clients. It was not my intention. But then in seeing myself in my clients, I eventually sought assessment diagnosis myself and was diagnosed with ADHD and autism at age 38. And so my specialty and my passion has really evolved to be, who else has been missed? Why were they missed? And what supports and resources do folks need when they're identified, after age 10, when it's a little further into life, and often folks don't necessarily know what they're looking for.
Well, that's fascinating. Very interesting that you fell into this career and then found your own diagnosis.
Yeah.
So you also, I believe, focus in areas of like anxiety, stress management, things like that. How do these aspects of your practice help you connect with your clients, or how do your clients find you?
Sure. So all of the work that I do I try to pull from or work from kind of a functional neuroscience background of thinking about like, okay, how is our brain and body working? What, for example, we do a lot of conversation, both in neurodivergence and when working with anxiety, of the amygdala and kind of the alarm system that is for our brain and body. And right, how that hormonal, all those changes that happen when our stress system gets activated, like how does that actually show up in our behavior? People know about fight or flight, but we don't really know what that means or think about like, okay, even if, for example, I calm down, it's going to take like 20 or 30 minutes for my body to actually metabolize a lot of what's happened, right? And
Mhm.
so a lot of this is about conversation of like, okay, some basics of how your brain and body work, and then what impacts it to work differently. Why are you struggling? Um, and whether that's neurodivergence or experiences of anxiety or depression or whatever it is, if we can start approaching it from a mindset of like, okay, well, your brain is trying to protect you, right? That's what the amygdala wants to do, is to try to keep us alive. And so if we can kind of try to keep that in mind with the challenges we face, it often gives a different frame of like, oh, so the things I'm doing in the moment may be sabotaging long term, because it maybe makes me feel safe right now. And particularly for ADHDers, with that
Yeah.
impulse control piece, that becomes really important to build some knowledge and some resources around.
Yeah. In my day job, I'm a pediatrician and I talk to
Mm-hmm.
kids all the time about the watchdog and then the
Mm-hmm.
wise old
Yeah.
owl and how the dog scares the owl away. And you have to learn how to calm down your watchdog, which is the amygdala.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to get some of these kids in with a therapist. And so many of them are afraid to go talk to anyone about what's going on in their lives. They don't want to open up.
Mm-hmm.
I try to explain to them that therapists can help them understand some of these things. So I love that you help get into some of this neuroscience aspect of it. Because I feel like if more people realized that they could go learn this stuff from a therapist, they wouldn't be as afraid to go see a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the Freudian, you lay on a couch and you talk about your dreams, you know?
It's amazing and frustrating too how persistent that image is, right? And so yeah, we're working against a lot of preconceived notions, even among kids.
Yeah. So, um, especially since you work with the queer community, it
Mm-hmm.
seems, how do you let people know that you're a safe space and where they could find other safe spaces like that for their needs?
Sure. So part of that is, kind of clear identification. Like it's right on our website and the organization I'm with. I'm proud to be co-founder of Purple Wellness. And from the get-go, we have been about working with and engaging with queer folk. And that's really clear on all of our stuff. And I've worked other places where that hasn't been true, or there's been reasons why that wasn't an option. And so other ways that I try to connect with clients and try to help them feel like this isn't a safe space, whatever their identities are, is trying to be really transparent about my own, and in ways that like acknowledging, okay, what do I bring into the space as a cisgender white gay man? That brings in certain privilege and perspective that I need to be aware of as a provider, right?
Mhm.
And so in that is a chance also to disclose, not to directly talk about my marriage, but to mention my husband, right? In my intro to folks, I include my pronouns, little things that can give cues to queer clients that hopefully can help them feel safe in the sense of like, oh, okay, I'm amongst a member of my community. And that also, I think, extends to trying to consider folks who are maybe not part of the queer community, because there are lots of different identities that people come in with. It's not just one. And so whether it's through a shared experience of neurodivergence or a shared experience of queerness or just a shared experience of humanity, if we can really try to tap into that, be a little vulnerable as a professional, there's tremendous opportunity for humanity and for connecting as humans. Um,
I
and
love
I
that.
think,
Yeah.
um, and I think particularly for therapy, that's really important.
Yeah. I think it is a hard position for any therapist um, to get the confidence of any client.
Hmm.
So, and of course, you're presenting at our February event for the ADHD KC parent group, the
Hmm.
Neurodivergent Adulting, Preparing for Life After High School. Without giving
Hmm.
too much away, can you share kind of a preview of what parents can expect to learn during the talk?
Sure. So I'm excited for a chance to get to kind of pull on my education background because I worked both for Johnson County Community College, Metropolitan Community College. So like this is an area I love being in and working with families. Um, the biggest thing I have found and that we want to talk about will be I never met a student in 10 years whose issue was they weren't smart enough or that within themselves they were not capable of the academics. It is the stuff around school or around going into the workplace for the first time that people struggle with. They don't have the supports
Mhm.
they need. Um, and we don't do a great job preparing for that transition, right? Because in K through 12, there is kind of mandated supports in a lot of ways. And so a lot of our conversation is going to be about, okay, how do we identify the supports that somebody needs? And how do we prepare people for success in advocating for their needs as part of this transition into a more independent adulthood?
Yeah. Well, that sounds like something many people, whether they're diagnosed or not diagnosed with ADHD, could
Mm-hmm.
benefit from. Is your talk going to be geared towards parents, towards the youth themselves, or both?
Sure. So this one we're approaching primarily from parents because often parents have so been deeply involved in advocating for their kids in IEP meetings, and so there is both supporting our the students for success, but it's a big change for parents too of like,
Mhm.
okay, so in part of identifying supports that help people be successful, parents want to be part of that solution, right?
Mhm.
um, and the way they provide support to their transitioning into adulthood kid is going to look different. And so that's going to be part of the conversation too, is like, okay, if we as we identify what our what the folks need who are growing into this transition, how does that impact what the parents and people who love them can be of best support? Because it's going to be different than when they were a junior or senior in high school. And so we need to grow with them.
Right. And that's rough as a parent of now two young adults. I
Hmm.
understand that process. One of my children has ADHD, and it was really hard. I was very nervous that she would oversleep the alarms and miss
Hmm.
class and all of the things. And of course, she proved herself, and that was fantastic. But
Hmm.
hopefully, parents can learn how to help their kids grow into those independent adults because we don't raise children, we raise adults, hopefully.
Exactly. Like that's the goal, right?
That's the
Um,
goal, that's the end goal.
mhm.
So I love that you're going to be talking to us. I feel like your background is so uniquely met for this, being a former educator and now even helping or formally working at JCCC, which I know they support a lot of youth who struggle with the traditional elementary and high school level stuff. They do such a fantastic job helping
Mhm.
these kids and young adults grow into their own. So I
Mhm.
think that this should be a fantastic talk. Do you have any other further comments or thoughts that you want to talk about?
Um, Maybe just since as you were sharing about Johnson County Community College, they do a tremendous job.
Mhm.
Um, and as folks think about these transitions with their kids, community colleges in general tend to have some of the strongest supports, resources, professionals. Having worked at community colleges and four-year institutions and public and private, the community colleges are the best at this.
Well, that's fantastic. I can't wait to hear more of your talk. February 11th at 6:30 Central. Anyone can register at adhdkc.org. Hit the events tab to find this and all our other programming. And before we wrap up, I'd love to ask one last question. For someone who's interested in following a path like yours, blending the academic, clinical, advocacy work, what advice would you give?
So I didn't know my career would go here. And so part of this is being open to needs. I feel like that's the through line of when I saw a need around me, I wanted to try to help with it. And I think that's a core part of advocacy, is paying attention to what are the needs around you, and is there anything you can do to be an ally, to be a support? How can you engage with something that you already see in your community? We can do that regardless of education. Beyond that, I would also encourage folks to meet people who are unlike themselves, because everybody's got an intersection of something. And so whether that's through volunteering, through, I had the benefit of working at a community college, and we tend to have a more diverse student population than many other institutions, and so that was good for me. So thinking about places where can you engage with folk? Where do people gather of many different walks of life? And can we go there and talk to people, or maybe just listen? I think a core part of advocacy we don't talk about enough is the listening part. There's a big thing within advocacy work of you can't do for a community. We can do with a community. And so that takes listening and consideration of where people are coming from.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Benjamin, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. I cannot wait to hear more from you at the ADHD Parent Group event in February. And for everyone, adhdkc.org, hit the events tab and sign up to listen to more of what Benjamin has to share about neurodivergence and young adulthood. So thank you.
Thanks again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning into this episode of ADHD Conversations. Don't forget to register for the talk. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. And until next time, take care and stay tuned.